In this video, I'm going to react to the top 10 worst NASCAR tracks. And welcome to another episode of Kabir Considers. This is the place where I react to music, media, sports, anime, anything related to popular culture. I'll watch it with an open mind and give you my 100% honest reaction to it. And if you could please hit that like button early, I'd really appreciate it. Now this is going to be a fun video. This is the first time in a while that I've reacted to one of Slap Shoes' videos. He's probably one of my favorite NASCAR content creators. His videos have a kind of almost like a documentary style, in the sense that he really delves really deeply into the history of whatever he's discussing. Like I remember quite a few months ago I reacted to the NASCAR Ghost track, where he actually went down to the site of where the track used to be, did a whole bunch of research, requested people sending in whatever they could find about the track. I believe he even put up a cash prize of, I think it was like $500 for anyone who could, let him know what happened to the track, where the track was. So yeah, I really love Slap Shoes' videos, and this video was recommended to me quite a few times. As someone who's quite new to NASCAR but has learned quite a lot, it's good to learn about the tracks that, don't have such a good reputation. Like in Formula One, anyone who's followed Formula One knows that Monaco, even though it's a really glamorous, glitzy race, because the track is so narrow, there's very little overtaking. So it pretty much becomes like a parade where they just follow each other around. Whoever gets in pole position pretty much wins that race. So yeah, this is going to be quite a fun video. So let's go. This is going to be me reacting to the top 10 worst NASCAR tracks. Let's do it. All right.
The NASCAR Cup Series has held nearly 2,700 races across more than 170 different tracks since its inception in 1949. And of those 170 tracks to host a big league NASCAR event, they ranged all the way from ultra-modern, state-of-the-art cathedrals of speed to simple dirt ovals carved out into the countryside. But the true magic of NASCAR is that you don't have to dump millions into a facility for it to be a fan favorite. A little ingenuity and some good management can go a long way in making both drivers and fans alike happy as can be. But some tracks today live on in infamy, detested by drivers and viewers alike, and some even by the people who built and managed them.
Oh wow, I mean, it's got to be really bad if the actual creator of that track despises it. I mean, like, what have I done?
Maybe the tracks produced boring races, maybe they were a dump nobody wanted to go to, or possibly they were just so dangerous that drivers said to hell with racing there, or in a few cases, all of the above. So today let's take a look at what I think are the top 10 worst tracks to have ever appeared on the NASCAR Cup Series schedule. To make this list, there are only two criteria. One, you have to have hosted at least one Cup race to date, and two, the track has to have a fairly uniform history of being bad in some respect. I'll be looking at the track's overall history inside and outside of NASCAR. So a stretch of bad races recently will not override decades of good racing.
And that's entirely fair, because it's quite easy for a place to, maybe due to wear and tear, the reputation of the place kind of lowers a bit, even though for the last 50 years it was an amazing facility. It's like a stadium. Back when it was built, it might have been great, the best stadium, but over time other ones overtook it in terms of the grandeur of the place, blah blah blah. So yeah, I think that's a good criteria.
Prior. So with all of that taken into consideration, let's get into it. Number 10, Talladega Superspeedway.
What? Really? What? Talladega?
Alright, let me explain. Okay, so Talladega today is a fan favorite with rabid turnout, drunken days-long parties taking place in the infield, and great close pack racing happening on a regular basis. But there are a lot of underlying issues that just barely put it on this list. When the track first saw the light of day in 1969, it was mired in controversy. A tire war between Goodyear and Firestone led to a driver walkout, and only 3 competitive cars took to the track, as field fillers were brought in at the last second.
No way. So all but 3 drivers remained. I need to go back and see some footage of that.
Bobby Isaac, one of those competitive cars, dropped back early on. And then of those two that were left, a scoring error means that we're not even sure which one of them actually won the race, even to this day. Add that rocky start to a litany of driver injuries and fatalities, and now we're talking about a track that is almost too dangerous to run at. Now,
fatalities? How many drivers were lost to that race? If anyone knows, let me know in the comment section.
NASCAR legend Tiny Lund lost his life here, Wendell Scott suffered a career-ending injury, and Dale Earnhardt Jr. had a wreck in 2012 that gave him a bad concussion and eventually led to his early retirement at the end of the 2017 season. And if all of that wasn't bad enough, Bobby Isaac once pulled off the track in the middle of a race and got out of his car because he said he heard voices in his head that told him to stop or else. Later in that same race, Rookie of the Year winner from the previous year, Larry Smith, died in an accident. And let's not forget about Bobby Allison's 1987 crash and Carl Edwards' 2009 wreck. Now we have to talk about how this is one of the few tracks where fans actually risk life and limb just sitting in the stands. And we haven't even talked about the multi-car pileups that make car owners seethe with anger at their mere mention of this track's name. The big one is such a ubiquitous event associated with Talladega that nobody wonders if it's going to happen or...
Good grief, the whole front end of that car obliterated. Dude, it looks like it got hit with a missile.
Even when. It's a matter of how many times it will happen throughout the day. Nowadays, races at Talladega are so marred by wrecks that they routinely go over their allotted runtime. And just this year at the second Talladega race, the event got booted off of network TV and was sent to cable, and hundreds of thousands of people never even got to see the end of the race. Oh, and I haven't even mentioned the yellow line rule yet. But hey, that's a topic for another video. It's a fun track, no doubt, but man does it have one sordid history and a lot of modern kinks to hammer out. How racing at Talladega will look as the years roll on is yet to be seen, but whatever happens, it will remain a fan favorite for a long time, no matter how badly it hurts the wallets of every team in the sport. Number 9, Kentucky Speedway. Only a phenomenal final race in 2020 saved this track from being higher on the list, but with years of boring cookie-cutter races under its belt, it's safe to say that Kentucky left a lot to be desired. The 1.5-mile track with 14 degrees of banking was a product of its time, and was part of an expansionist phase with NASCAR to put big venues in big markets, but it just never took off. When it was brought onto the schedule in 2011, hopes were high for this track. It had originally been built in 2000, and with the 11-year-old surface and ultra-wide track, many thought the racing would be phenomenal, as it had been in the Busch and ARCA series from the previous decade. But the track...
Because yeah, you would assume that because it's a wide track, overtaking opportunities will be aplenty, right? I wonder why it didn't work.
The track just produced snooze fests. On top of that, its first race in 2011 was plagued with infrastructure issues, and a massive traffic jam on opening day meant that thousands couldn't even make it to the track for the green flag.
Man.
Later they fixed these issues, but in 2015 another problem popped up. Drainage problems were compounded by weepers in the turns that held water and slowly expelled it onto the track over the course of hours. So even when the rain stopped, the track would take hours upon hours to fully dry. They repaved it for the 2016 season with higher banks in turns 1 and 2, but 3 and 4 were left at their normal 14 degrees, and the width of the track was also reduced from 72 feet to 56 feet, so that its one saving grace of a wide track surface was taken away. Despite being near the promising markets close to Louisville and Cincinnati, in 2020 it was announced that it would be dropped from the schedule for the 2021 season, and very few NASCAR fans mourned its passing. Instead, it was met with a firm good riddance. Number 8, Raleigh Speedway.
I wonder how much money was invested into that track. I'd have to guess. In terms of the size, purchase of land, got to be a couple million at the minimum, right? At the minimum, a few million. Let me know in the comment section if anyone knows, like what was the cost of construction for the Kentucky Speedway, and what's the average cost of construction for a speedway? I'd love to know.
Today we race fans get peeved at people who decide to build their homes next to active racetracks and then complain that there's too much noise. Myrtle Beach was torn down in part because of such complaints. Nashville has to deal with strict curfews and noise ordinances to this very day, and Laguna Seca can only hold races on certain pre-approved weekends. This is of course absurd. If you don't like the noise, perhaps you shouldn't have built your house next to a racetrack. I mean, what did you think went on there? But what about the opposite happening? What if you built your house far away from the hustle and bustle of the city, only to have a 1-mile superspeedway built on your backyard?
Man, that would piss a lot of people off. Oh my God. Imagine that. You've deliberately picked somewhere in the middle of nowhere, you know, to get away from city life. Maybe you've spent 20 years, you know, working in some high pressure corporate job. You've finally saved enough to leave all the noise behind. And then a NASCAR Speedway. Oh my God. devastated.
Well, that happened in Raleigh, North Carolina. Built in 1952, Raleigh Speedway was one of NASCAR's first paved superspeedways, being 1 mile in length with 16-degree banks. It offered up some of the biggest prize pools in NASCAR at that time, and IndyCar races were also popular at the venue. They even installed stadium lights at the track and would usually race the Cup Series on the night of July 4th. But that only exacerbated the problem with the locals, who had to deal with the noise all throughout the year from modified races and weekly racing on the quarter-mile infield track. In 1953, the track had 2 fatalities in one night, when Bill Blevins stalled on the backstretch coming to take the green flag. The track's lighting was dim and Bill's burgundy car was hard to see from the press box nearly half a mile away. So NASCAR started the race thinking nothing was wrong. But then as the cars came around, everybody scrambled to miss Blevins, except Jesse Midkiff, who hit him head on, and both drivers died instantly.
Oh my God. Imagine witnessing that. Oh man. It would be hard to forget that. Because these, NASCAR stock cars, they go pretty quickly. So a head-on collision or...
That event thereafter was referred to as Black Saturday, and it gave the track a dangerous reputation. And with complaints against the Speedway continuing to pile up, when promoter Bill France had an open slot for Daytona for the July 4th weekend of 1959, he canceled the race at Raleigh and moved the date to Daytona, where it remained until just this year. The track was abandoned shortly thereafter and the land was repurposed over the years. However, a portion of the backstretch still remains in the woods next to a Duke Energy substation. And as fate would have it, the portion remaining is the site of Blevins and Midkiff's fatal accident. Number 7. Islip Speedway. One of just a few tracks ever built on Long Island, New York, Islip Speedway is credited with hosting the first Demolition Derby and Figure 8 races ever. A novel idea from track owner Larry Mendelson drew in tons of fans, and they ended up sticking around for the real racing, quote-unquote, that went on too. It was a massive draw for modifieds, but the Cup Series also came by from 1964 until 1971, and the races were big hits with the fans. So what's the problem? The track was just way too small. It holds the distinction of being the smallest track to ever host a Cup race at just 1/5 of a mile long, even smaller than Bowman Gray Stadium. And the Cup...
I mean, yeah, that is way too small, especially if you're a figure 8. I mean, that's like asking for an accident to happen, right? Because, yeah, cars coming, like you could potentially have like 2 cars approaching from either side, just meet in the middle and bang. If there's not enough distance, like if it was a bit bigger, the chances of that happening are fewer. Unless I've messed up my rationale here.
Cup Series was bringing 25 to 33 cars per race. It was so bad that guys in the back of the pack would know when to take the green flag because they could see the leaders taking it in their rearview mirrors. Also, due to its small size, it was incredibly hard to pass. During its entire run in the Cup Series across 6 races, there were a combined 12 lead changes. That's it. Plus, when you take into consideration that it was halfway up Long Island, and the logistical nightmare that must have been driving through New York City just to get there when there's another race just a few days later in Maine, yeah, there's no way Islip was going to work out long term. It lived on as a draw for the modifieds until the 1980s, when it was torn down to build a cookie factory of all things. Number 6, Columbia Speedway. Hosting one of the last dirt races ever in the Cup Series in 1970, Columbia Speedway in Casey, South Carolina was a massive draw for the Cup Series and weekly racing series for decades. Its hard-packed dirt surface produced fast racing and intense side-by-side action that was so good that the Cup Series routinely came here 2 or sometimes even 3 times per year. And as such, the list of winners here reads like a list of Hall of Famers. Fans loved the track and turned out in droves to watch the races of all kinds out here, and it even had lights for night racing during the hot summer months. So what's the problem? The track had some serious design flaws in its construction. To put it bluntly, it was just really outdated. The walls and the turns were just thick wooden planking held in place with telephone poles, and one time David Pearson careened through the wall in turn 1 and ended up in a little creek in the woods. Plus, the front stretch wall was literally just 3 rows of railroad rails hoisted up by more rails set into the ground in 3 feet of concrete, meaning that if a car hit it, it would almost certainly be torn apart and a rail might get lodged inside the car and impale a driver.
Why wasn't it modified? I mean, why wasn't it improved over the years? You know, I imagine if it's doing well, why would you not, as the owner, just improve the fencing, just make the necessary changes? I just don't get why you would leave it like that.
While that never happened in the Cup Series, there was an instance of a motorcycle racer who fell off of his bike and hit the railing at high speed and died instantly. Many local late model racers and NASCAR guys flat out refused to race here, citing safety concerns. And when the track was paved in 1971, the faster speeds made even more drivers anxious about racing here. Add that to the tiny pit road and you have a track that was never going to survive the modernization efforts of 1972. And Columbia was abandoned shortly thereafter. In 2010, the land was reclaimed and the track lives on today as a venue for concerts, car shows, and other outdoor events. Number 5, Texas Motor Speedway. Okay, so the litany of reasons why this track ended up being so high on the list is a long one, but here's the Cliff Notes version. Originally built as a state-of-the-art track that would host NASCAR and IndyCar races, track owner Bruton Smith bought out North Wilkesboro Speedway and left it to rot in North Carolina just so he could have a guaranteed race date.
Wow.
Then in testing, a month before its first race in 1997, it was found out that pit lane was too narrow and the transitions out of the corners were horrible. So they made a bunch of last-minute fixes to the track, and there was a massive pile-up on the first lap of the race anyway. They spent millions to reconfigure the track, there was another wreckfest of a race in 1998, and they spent another $2 million reconfiguring it again. And after all that, the track only produced mediocre racing. The infrastructure and amenities at the track were top-notch, but dwindling crowds have many NASCAR fans wondering if the Dallas-Fort Worth area is a market worth staying at. Stands that used to sit over 150,000 people are now lucky to get a third as many people to show up on race day. And another reconfiguring in 2017 where banking in turns 1 and 2 was reduced made racing even more lackluster. The track used to have some marquee events on the NASCAR and IndyCar schedules, but with Chicago and Kentucky both being dropped for 2021 out of the blue, many wonder if Texas will receive the same fate as the years roll on. Number 4, Tulsa Fairgrounds Speedway. A mainstay in the early IndyCar days, Tulsa was set up to be a foray into the Western market for NASCAR in 1956. One day prior, a race at the Oklahoma State Fairgrounds in Oklahoma City was held, but only about 12 cars showed up for that race and Jim Paschal ended up with a W after it was all said and done. The next day, the same guys headed over to Tulsa for a 200-lap event at the half-mile dirt oval at the fairgrounds. But it was in the middle of a drought in early August and the track had not been kept up or prepared for a race. And with no water being put on the track, it created tons of dust. The dust was so bad that announcers couldn't even see who was where on the track.
That is so dangerous. I mean, you know, forget about the announcers for a minute. The drivers, if the dust is super thick and almost like fog, and you can't see where you're going and you can't see who's in front of you, you know, I don't have to say what could happen. It's just literally an accident waiting to happen.
Track, and drivers said they couldn't even see 3 feet in front of them. Fans were reportedly coughing up dirt and running out of the grandstands to catch their breath. And after 32 laps, Lee Petty, who was running second, pulled into the pits, walked across the track while the race was still going on, kicked open the crossover gate, climbed up to the flag stand, and took the red flag for himself to wave the race off. Officially on lap 34, the race was halted and never resumed. No prize money or points were awarded, and everybody packed up and left and acted as though the race had never even happened in the first place. NASCAR never came back to the state of Oklahoma ever again. Yeah, one horrible race ended NASCAR's plans for westward expansion. They'd stay mostly a southeastern sport for decades to come. Tulsa lived on.
Oh man, that seems a bit harsh though. I mean, because Slap says that if they had just if they just put some water on the track, this wouldn't have happened. So it seems like it could have been an easy fix. So to abandon Oklahoma, like completely and never go back, seems a bit harsh. But I don't know, maybe there's more to the story.
On hosting dirt races for years afterwards though in other series, but in 2009 it was closed down and demolished 1 year later. Number 3, Airbase Speedway. Longtime viewers will immediately know why this track made the list, but for those of you just hearing about this track for the first time, let me give you the rundown. Originally called Greenville Textile Speedway, this track was built by Charlie Hicks in Greenville, South Carolina in 1949. It hosted tons of local races with late models, modifieds, motorcycles, and more. It even had lights and held night races, a rarity for the time. In 1950, the track changed its name to Airbase Speedway, in honor of the Donaldson Air Force Base just north of the track.
This is the video. This is the track that Slap made the investigatory video. I think the ghost track. Yeah, I think this is the one.
Later that year, one race had to be called off in the middle of the main event for bad track conditions. And despite being billed as the fastest track in the Southeast, qualifying times were horrendously slow. As it turned out, Charlie Hicks really didn't have any clue what he was doing. The track also had no permanent amenities to speak of and was overall just a kind of slapdash ramshackle affair. Hell, the track utilized wooden walls all the way up until its dying day. Despite bad track conditions, slow speeds, and virtually nothing in the way of luxuries for fans, Charlie Hicks did manage to weasel his way onto the 1951 Cup Series schedule with an August 25th race date. The race went off without any issues, and Bob Flock won. But when Buck Baker tried to lease the track at the end of the year, he ran into a problem. Hicks had tried to procure a loan for the track, but never disclosed that the facility had a lien on it from the bank. That netted him a fraud charge and a whopping fine of $19,000 in today's money, and that would eventually put him under. The track was sold and left to rot over the course of decades. It's now the site of an industrial park, but if you know where to look, you can still find a section of the backstretch today tucked away in the woods. Number 2, Texas World Speedway. Located in College Station, Texas, Texas World was supposed...
Good grief. What are these? Are these parked cars? Are these all cars here? Man, this is a ton of cars. Crazy.
To be the next leap forward in tracks made for NASCAR. It was built as a 1-for-1 copy of Michigan International with a 2-mile D-shaped configuration, but Texas's banks were 4 degrees steeper for a total of 22 degrees. It held its first races in 1969 and would host NASCAR and IndyCar races just 1 year later. But in the first few years, something was amiss. The track was fast, there were plenty of lead changes, and drivers seemed to like the track itself, but the amenities left a lot to be desired. Building a 2-mile superspeedway ain't cheap, and the original builders had cut corners where they could. Rumors about bathrooms not working or overflowing persisted, and even by the standards of the time, everything except the product on the track was lagging sorely behind expectations. Fewer and fewer folks kept coming out to the races, and by the mid-70s, the track was taken off the schedule and changed hands and ownership a few times. One owner even went bankrupt trying to keep the place going. It came back from 1979 through 1981, but by then it was clear that the new owners were just barely scraping by, and the track was falling apart at the seams. Not to mention people still would not show up to the races. After 1981, the NASCAR Cup Series never came back, but Texas World would go on to be bought out by a Japanese company who gave it a much-needed repave in the 1990s, and it hosted some Busch East and ARCA races until they too left. And the only sanctioning body left at the track was the Sports Car Club of America, who utilized the 3-mile infield road course, all the way up until the track's dying day in 2017. Nowadays, the track is in the slow and steady process of being demolished, but with the economy grinding to a halt, so has its destruction. So it still remains standing for now. A multi-million-dollar track with big ambitions falling apart from day one, and a rotating door of owners who could never make it work, meant that fans never wanted to turn out to the Speedway, and off into the history books it went. Man, between it and Texas Motor Speedway and COTA and possible financial trouble, you might start wondering why we're even in the Texas market in the first place. It honestly seems like they just don't like auto racing down there, but that's a video for another time. Number 1, Langhorne Speedway. Widely considered by many at the time to be the most dangerous track in the U.S., Langhorne Speedway in Langhorne, Pennsylvania was a 1-mile, almost perfectly circular dirt oval. And since the whole track was basically one gigantic left-hand turn, that meant that drivers were constantly in the throttle. And
yeah, oh my god, imagine that constantly you're just... Oh, that would be crazy. Just constantly turning in. Oh.
Any mechanical failure or crash would result in a pile-up into the outside wall, which was just a thin strip of guardrail. No less than 18 drivers died at the track, and many more were injured over the years. Bobby Unser said of the track, "That was the most dangerous track on earth. I can't imagine another track being that dangerous." Both NASCAR and IndyCar drivers feared racing there, but that didn't stop it from being a hit with the fans. It routinely drew in 20,000 or more attendees at a time when most tracks couldn't even get half that. And being so close to the big market of Philadelphia didn't hurt either. While NASCAR stopped coming here in the late 50s, IndyCar pressed on. But in the 70s, when the track was paved and speeds became even faster, the danger was just too much and drivers boycotted the race.
Doesn't that say a lot about the human psyche? So, despite it being by far the most dangerous track at the time, it was consistently drawing double the amount of people. You know, just says a lot that we human beings, we just crave like excitement at any cost. Even if the excitement involves high amounts of danger for the people participating, whether it's athletes or drivers, we just want to see excitement, no matter what.
Langhorne was sold and demolished not too long afterwards. It was a founding track in NASCAR with a lot of history, but unfortunately, its configuration and lack of safety features sealed its fate. Anyway, I'm Slapshoes. Thanks for watching.
That was a lot of fun. I mean, a lot of those tracks, it just seems unfortunate that, you know, so much money was invested in these areas and it feels like proper market research wasn't really conducted. I know it's easy to say in hindsight, you know, hindsight is 2020 and all, but I mean, the second to last track, I forget its name, the one where it went through like 3 different owners who all tried and failed. I mean, there must be a reason. If you're the third guy, there must be a reason why the first 2 people were unsuccessful. Identify those reasons and maybe don't make that purchase. And that last track, I mean, the danger, like, I imagine watching races there, no doubt must have been extremely exciting, but to have that amount of fatalities, I mean, whose idea was it to make it a perfect circle? Didn't they consult some, you know, physics people, you know, the engineers to calculate, you know, determine how safe this is to do? Yeah, just really fascinating video. Great job by Slapshoes. Once again, this was a ton of fun. Thanks for watching, guys. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, turn on bell notifications, and keep throwing the recommendations my way. I know I say it all the time, but they genuinely help me out, because if I know you enjoyed watching something, I'll definitely enjoy reacting to it. So like, subscribe, turn on bell notifications, keep throwing the recommendations, and I'll catch you in the next one.